You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Mr. Back!
You're listening to Making Tracks, and you're joining us in the town hall at Fordingbridge. We're sat upstairs. It's lovely and quiet, but most importantly, it's warm. And I'm sat here with John Hipkiss. John, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, my friend, thank you. It is nice and warm.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's raging outside. This Storm Dara is currently happening across the UK. It's been wet, it's been windy. Our caravan this morning literally rocked, and not for the right reasons.
We all felt it go, and it did shift.
Yeah.
And that's a large sort of fix to the ground.
Yeah, the earth moved. So here we are later on in the day at Farthest From. It's Saturday as we're speaking. Farthest From's usually on the Sunday. Dave has shifted the show around a little bit this time. Quite apart from the lousy British weather, what are you made of the show this time? Because it has changed the flavour of it a little bit by doing it on the Saturday, and we've got the meal coming up tonight as we speak. It's a little bit different. It's nice to change things up though, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the new format has been exciting since they announced it, really. For Sundays, different collectors travelling and stuff like that,
Yeah.
whereas, you know, you can, if you think to yourself, oh, I'll do the toy show on the Saturday, I can do the meal, and I can be back for Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
It gives you that bit of breathing space, because it's always a busy time of year. They've pulled it out the bag with the guests again, following on from last year with Pablo. So I was really excited for the new format, and I think it's going to work. There's a day of panels tomorrow.
Yes.
I was equally as excited about as some of the pickups that I might be able to get, which was nice. You don't get that at any other event.
That's true. We've got Steve Evans here, as you've just alluded to, Brian Hickey as well, who worked on the My Palatoy book. So you've got people who are deep into their collective corners of the fandom. People will know of Steve. They'll have seen him talking online. He's got his own YouTube show. He's a very engaging character. So for that exact reason you just said, I think the talks tomorrow are going to be, you know, really quite special.
Well, I mean, Steve, really, sort of bordering on a celebration. Where, you know, if Steve was doing a panel at Celebration, you'd absolutely...
pack the room.
Yeah, absolutely. So really excited. We've sort of had what was meant to be maybe a quick 5 minutes turned into, we were stood by him for half an hour. He's as you was expecting, down to earth, chatty, happy to go with the flow.
Interesting that you say that. Not that he's interesting and chatty, because anybody that's ever seen him or met him will know that, but the fact that when you get talking to somebody in the position that he's in, the respect and the knowledge for the history of the line, specifically vintage, is quite evident. And how much he wants to honour that and make it a thing, and I'm waggling the air quotes, you know, make it a thing again. Because when we were kids, and it's different when we were kids, I know there's a bit of an age gap, but when we were kids collectively, you're not as hooked into the broader fandom. You just aren't, because you're a kid. You're more invested in ripping the bubble off and playing with the toy. But you kind of look back and realise that whilst there wasn't a community then that there is now, you were part of something.
Yeah, and you didn't know it at the time, but of course, I think because we're in a different era now, this is what Steve's sort of been talking about, and what Hasbro were trying to figure out is, well, how do you... We didn't have this as a kid, you know. The other night I was watching something, didn't get me, so after 2 minutes I changed it, and in 10 seconds, well, that wasn't the case. You had to watch it because that was all you had.
That's right.
And then with a toy, whereas now, was it you yourself earlier said, it's just phones, kids have...
Oh, yeah.
But so it's been fascinating. But what comes across with Steve is there's no corporate talk when he's talking to you. It is purely... He loves toys, he loves Star Wars. I know he's sort of a designer on Marvel as well.
Yeah.
But he genuinely has the passion. You know what else I came across? First time for myself meeting him, and I'd heard nothing but good things. But because obviously at an event like this, I suppose the only slight trouble might be is everyone just wants to go, I want this toy, I want this toy, I want this toy. Whereas we didn't quite do that, but you should have shared opinion. And everyone's got an opinion there. We know what they're like. But I tell you what, he was listening.
He was.
And he was genuinely listening, because you can tell that with people.
And
it was a real privilege.
In the corridor, a chap came in who was coming to the mill tonight, and I don't think he quite realised who Steve was. But once he got talking, you realised this guy has got ridiculous knowledge. Like, he was collecting ridiculous stuff, and Steve was like, wow, the stuff you're getting is amazing. And so even though they didn't connect because the guy knew that Steve was a mover and shaker at Hasbro, they completely connected as collectors. And just sitting there listening and watching that conversation happen was really quite cool.
Well, because everyone's it's such a different eras. I was talking to him about how the 1990s Power of the Force 12-inch line was what got me in, more so than the little figures, because it was more bang for your buck. And he was totally with it. He totally got it and was there with it. And he gave a little nugget now that regardless of anything, some of the best sellers are the Marvel 12-inch
the Titan line
toys. Yeah, those ones that sell. And so you do just connect. Why? Because it doesn't really matter what era you're in.
Yeah.
You're still getting hooked by toys.
And it's funny when you said about how you came in on that particular 12-inch line, and me and Mark on the pod say it all the time about, and to different people from different corners of the fandom and different corners of Star Wars, there's a multitude, a literal multitude of things that first pull you in, first to Star Wars, because it depends on when you got into it or what age you are when you come to it, and also in collecting. For me, I was there when the first Palitoy wave came out, because I'm that old, and Star Wars was the first thing, and it was the only thing, and then stumbled on Splinters as a kid, and on you go. When you come into it 20 years later, or you come into it 30 years later, and there's plenty of 20-year-olds that have been into it for all their life now, and you go back 20 years, and it's Sith 20th next year. So that's when they came in on the tail end of all of it, essentially finishing. The circle was complete, as the wristband said. So everyone's got a different way in. It's fascinating to hear you mention that was your angling, because I never got any of the 12-inch figures. It was never something that came my way or grabbed me.
Right. Well, I've gone back to get the 12-inch vintage era figures, but so the story goes, I had cousin gave me the VHS tapes of 4, 5, 6, and then a short time after, me, mum, dad, nan and granddad were down on holiday, and I've got this memory. I can photograph this memory. We're in a Woolies, and I got some holiday spending money, and there was a 12-inch Han Solo. And I said, look, I need that from there. I remember my mum saying, don't get it, Tim, it'll be a fad. My granddad, God rest his soul, I had that toy. It's all I played with all week in the caravan. That was the very, very first. And then, of course, you go into, now I'm at 3.75 and all that. So it is. And what was interesting talking to Steve, a slight tangent, but what you get with the love of him was, I didn't know this, it was his figures that they used for the retro collection.
To scan the retro stuff.
And the indie line, the indie line from last year.
That, you can't imbue a line with more love and care and attention than taking someone's actual toys and scanning them. That I didn't know that. That was just such a nugget to learn.
I didn't know that. I had no idea. And it's his baby, the retro line. It was fascinating. And there's something you can always tell the difference when someone's talking corporate speak or when they're talking from the heart. And that's what I really, really did get with. We haven't even seen his panel yet.
No.
Or his Q&A tonight. This is literally, we're talking about a half-hour chit-chat we had with him in the corner. Yeah.
It's interesting. As a collector, anyone as a collector, what is it that keeps you collecting? We were talking about this on the drive up yesterday about, if you could divine and whittle down what it is that keeps us interested in Star Wars. I think we've probably spoke about it for an hour, and then kind of come to the summarisation that, I kind of don't want to know. I don't think I need to know why I love Star Wars so much. And it's almost the same with collecting. It's like, what is it grabs you about? Why are some people 3 3/4? Why are some people now currently digging the retro stuff? Why are some people Black Series or the 12-inch line or going way back to micro collection or micro machines? Whatever your thing is, I'm loving the Jazzware stuff at the moment. I just bought the Ghost,
you love those,
the Amazon Ghost. I think they're fantastic. So that's lighting me up at the moment. But what is it that grabs people through a particular line of the toys? And even with a company like Hasbro that's got the Star Wars license, and I've got multiple, because you've got what they call now, the Mashams,
Mix Mashers.
Mix Mashers. That's just been announced. I should know that. It's on the site. So there's them, and then they've got the 4-inch line, the epic
the
ones,
hero line.
So there's them. So they've got multiple sort of iterations, expressions, I think they call them. What is it that grabs you about a particular one? And just talking to Steve, there's the history of the vintage line, and not just the playability, but the fact that you could have, he literally drew it on the table, you could have a 2x2 foot square area in your living room as a kid, and that can be Echo Base, or that can be the landing platform at Bespin, or it can be anything you want. You scale up too much, it's not feasible. You ain't going to have a Black Series Falcon.
No, impossible. Absolutely impossible. I mean, I sometimes wonder if things are of their time.
Yes.
So I was a kid of the 90s. I wasn't really a video gamer, even though they were starting to get there. But how do you entertain yourself as me, an only child? Well, you get your box of toys out.
Yeah.
And that's what you did for the afternoon.
I've got to say, mate, not to interrupt, you're very old school in the way you refer to these things, because that's so what the kids in the 70s and 80s did.
Yeah.
But you, as that bit younger, in and around, there's more distractions.
Well, look at now.
Yeah.
You look at now, it's, what do you give a title? I see toddlers with iPads and stuff like that. Well, where's the cuddly toy? So this is something that Steve was really, really talking about, that his biggest drive and he's a storytelling guy.
He is.
And you can get that. We ended up talking about the Return to Tatooine theme. These stories are going to be a massive... I don't think this is a spoiler.
No.
It's going to be a big part of what Hasbro are going to... And that was his, along with the retro collection, his baby moving forward. Yeah. They've got to have stories. Stories are what keep us engaged and keep us going.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
So we're making tracks. We're at Fordingbridge Town Hall. It's Sunday. Farthest From was yesterday. Today is the Talks Day. Yep. We're here with Steve. I'm here with Matt. Hello.
Hello.
We're here with Steve Evans.
We're so professional.
Don't even need a surname now.
What's your job title now, Steve?
I am now Senior Director for, very important, for Marvel and Star Wars, focusing on fan adult collector product. Okay. So whereas previously when I was on Marvel and Star Wars before, I was, kids and grown-ups. Yep. And now I'm just for those grown-up kids. Gotcha. Or those kid grown-ups.
So a show like this... Okay, you could turn up. We said this yesterday. Let's smile for the camera.
Can't see that on the podcast.
No, you can't, it's not good for
fantastic.
Yeah? You could have turned up yesterday with that panel, or rather the panel you're going to do today, and the chat, the Q&A that you did yesterday, and sat on one of the biggest stages at Celebration with a couple of thousand people. And yet you're here in Fordingbridge in December with a load of focus collectors. So what for you, other than just you're here and you're visiting family and you're meeting friends and catching up with folks, what's the value for you in your role at Hasbro of an event like this?
That is a great question. I often ask myself why I'm here. No, I'm joking. I'm completely
it was the burgers
joking.
On Friday night. Come on.
There is. It sounds very grand. It's going to sound more grand than it really is. It's like you have the old adage, don't forget where you came from.
Yeah.
I started collecting Star Wars figures in the early 90s. And I went to conventions, if you can call them conventions. Sure. Let's call them gatherings. I went to gatherings exactly like this one, in old dusty town halls, which this one is a dusty town hall. It's absolutely beautiful.
Always has been for all the years he's run it.
All beautiful.
No one's dusty.
Or rooms above pubs. I used to go meet with people that I'd never met before, and we were all brought together for I'm going to say love and fascination for Star Wars collecting. Yeah. Because it was new in those days. We were like, I remember playing with these kind of figures, and now they're kind of back. We had Steve Sansweet's book, From Screen to Concept to Collectible, as our Bible.
I bought that in Brighton.
Yeah, 100%.
I bought it in the books in Brighton, and then I went and hunted out all the figures and bought them all again.
100%. So that reignited something in me, and that's what I did throughout the 90s. Yeah. And then when Dave Tree rang me out of the middle of nowhere and said, do you fancy coming down to Fordingbridge? It's in the New Forest. And I lived in Lyndhurst, which is down the road when I was very young. And I was like, yeah. And he says it's really small, and it's kind of meant to be like that. It's got this sort of 90s vibe, honest, open. And I was like, I'm there. Yeah. I'm going to go for me, so I can remember what it's like and kind of keep my feet grounded. And I'm going to come because it's the grassiest grassroots you can get.
Yes.
These people, I'm not dealing with thousands of people coming up from all over the world. There's like 50 people, all kind of, well, they're not all local. Some people come down from Manchester. Yeah. But it's just, I get honest feedback.
Well, you said something yesterday that was interesting in that when you were talking to the Generation Skywalker lads, you said sometimes in this game you can be too much of a fan. When you're your side of the desk, the frustration of not being able to make all the things that you want could be kind of too much to keep your head straight and do things in the right way. So when you're at an event like this, or when you're at a big event like, I don't know, MCM or any other event, what are you looking for? What kind of information are you looking for? What kind of feedback? Because you said you're now focused on the older collectors rather than the kid
Absolutely,
players,
yeah.
if that makes sense. So what sort of things are you looking for?
So I use the word sentiment because I can get opinions anywhere. I could speak to you two and I could say, what do you think of this, Matt? And he can tell me what he thinks. So the ability...
I will.
Yeah, I know. The ability to be able to speak to different people and gauge... Because I read people, not what they're saying, but how they're saying it, and body language, stuff like that. So I can tell when they really mean it. And what I do is I can go to different people and sort of ask or inquire about the same kind of thing. And I can build a sentiment. Because I'm not going to listen to Matt. I'm not going to do what he tells me to do. No, but if he's one of many that feel kind of the same way and I can see it in their eyes, I know it's real and I know it's something, then I can go away and think about it. So going to cons, big and small, gives me the ability to really try and understand the insight. Because a lot of people will jump on social media and just blast me and tell me, and I'm like, well, I don't know whether that's true. That's just your opinion. So
how do you...
I prefer the human experience.
Absolutely. So how do you fold in... Getting quite granular now. How do you fold in that knowledge you've picked up from a conversation like that, and, if this is the right phrase, course correct things to make it work in the way you think it might want to go? Is that kind of picking things out of thin air, or...?
No, I mean, you can kind of... I'm not a very intelligent person, so I like to boil things down. So I try and paint things quite black and white and try and kind of simplify things. So, like, if I get a sentiment, I can then take that back to what we're doing strategically or what we're currently doing or what, more importantly, what we're going to do, and kind of be informed by it.
Yeah.
Because I want to make stuff that you guys love, all right? And there's going to be stuff I make that you love, and there's going to be stuff that I make that you don't love, and that's okay because someone over there to the left of you, Mark, loves that. So I've got a lot of masters and mistresses
in your job. You've got to cater to a very wide audience.
Yeah. So if I can knit that together with a story that makes sense, I might be able to please some people, and I may be able to bring some people into being pleased by it. So that's why you'll see. Certainly today, and on our products going forward, especially on the vintage collection, where you've got a very focused group of passionate collectors, storytelling is going to be really important. It's not going to be like a scatter shot of stuff. So, like in 25, we're doing Return to Tatooine. So it's simple, right? I'm not intelligent. It's a very simple story. Here's some products that are all tied together that will make a story and hopefully excite people to get into it and get updates on the mains and get new things and.
But that's
collect
pure
the posters.
Back to its roots thing, isn't it? Back to
is.
Tatooine is the roots of all.
That's exactly
of it.
what I'm doing this weekend. It's back to the roots. It's back to basics. It's been used too many times, but it's back to the roots of what made this special for me. Because I don't disbelieve that the current generation, our generation, feeling differently. We want to remember what it was like and what it felt like. So
you wish you had 1,000 slots a year to make 1,000 new things.
Of course you do.
The business doesn't do that anymore.
No, we've got to make the right choices. And so we make the choices based on, obviously, how we support our partners at Disney and Lucasfilm, what makes sense for our partners in retail. But underpinning all of that is what makes sense for the fans who like everything and they have little internal tribes that like something and don't like other things. So I know my job is absolutely impossible, but I love it nevertheless. I wouldn't do anything else.
When you talk about resale, was next to Matt, who's run a comic shop for however many years?
30 years.
Yeah. So as an independent retailer, for example, do you listen as much to an independent guy as you would listen to a big box store? Obviously, they've got more buying power, but do you know what I'm getting at?
I think it's that same sentiment thing. So, like, if we're seeing commonalities and seeing trends or things that we can either lean into or correct, that's what we have to react to. It's like I've always been brought up never to just listen to the loudest voice. It's you listen, and then you listen, then you hear. That's different.
We get people on Fantha when you do some new reveals. Oh, why is it a Walmart exclusive? And my reply is because Walmart have the buying power to pay for a product to be made in the entire production run. Yeah, that's what's exclusive.
Yeah, exclusives are important.
There's very few retailers left out in America now, compared to what there was 30 years ago, because Walmart and Target have eaten them all up.
So it's a mix. Completely. It's a portfolio. Yeah. So we'll do lots of different things and. Again, try and please everybody, which is impossible, but I'm never going to stop trying. And
you guys, we all know, back in the day, say the 90s, anytime an exclusive came out, it was something cool to chase. Yeah. You're a FET-focused guy, Matt, so there was always things to chase there, and I'm quite a generalist. I like a bit of everything. Do you still enjoy the exclusives? I know it might not be everybody's cup of tea, but when you put something out that's an exclusive, it does get a buzz going, it gets the socials going, it gets people talking. That's part of the strategy, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's strategy behind it. And when I'm actually, when we design things as designers, often the exclusives will be just kind of maybe a little bit wacky, maybe a little bit left field, or a little bit different, or we're forced to be creative. It's like, hey, they want this exclusive, and what can you do around this sort of theme that they're giving you? So that's a nice,
without too much new moulding.
That's a nice creative challenge. Yeah. It's fun. Again, it's portfolio. We do different things, so it keeps it interesting.
What would you say is the one thing that somebody new to? I mean, collecting is collecting. You don't need to know a stitch about the process of making a figure, but you'll love what's out, and you might love the packaging, you might love the figure, or it's just something that you want. What would you say is the one thing that would surprise somebody who knows nothing about the toy industry, about the process of getting a toy made? What one thing is the real, like, wow, if you told it to them, they'd never believe it?
I think people think it takes a lot longer to make a toy than I think people think. They think, oh, I've seen that, I'd like to buy it, because that's the consumer experience. I've seen that in the movies or on TV. I can go down to the store, shop, and I can find it.
From concept of a figure, from you guys saying yes, we're going to do it, to being on shelf, it's about 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, exactly right. You've been listening. That's good. But it is getting shorter, because we're making advancements in technology and digital sculpting, and our relationships is always improving in terms of getting approvals and things like that. So we're trying to get it shorter, because
they're turning out films quicker.
Exactly. Entertainment is becoming faster, and like using the void and things like that. All this technology is updating, and it's keeping us on our toes. That is basically my day.
Well, keeping like Fantastic Four, which you've probably seen some stuff from, but we won't talk about.
Can't comment on that.
But they started filming at San Diego Comic-Con. The week after San Diego Comic-Con, it's coming out in a year.
Yeah.
That's crazy for toy makers.
It's amazing
what
they do.
The product on shelf.
And what we'll find, especially in my section, that fan kind of collector section, where authenticity and accuracy is really important.
Yeah.
We try our very best to get everything accurate. Yeah. So sometimes we work off concept art and things like that, so it's maybe not quite right, or because directors will change costumes when they walk onto set. They'll say, "Oh, actually, don't wear that scarf. Take that off," and it's like, "Oh, okay, that's different." So what we try and do, we try and get things to release at the same time. But often, what I've found, especially on Marvel, we'll call it the chase. So it'll come out a little bit later, because I want to give you the accurate version of it. And you know what? We're collectors, and we're in it forever. We're not kids that are coming in and walking, and go, "Oh, I like that," and next week I'm on to something else.
And there's so much content coming out, you can't revisit stuff.
And I think certainly on the Marvel Legends side, that's an almost an accepted way that we do things, and I want to give the best product at the end of the day, and I know that this is not a fad for us, all of us. We're collectors for life, right? Till we die, right? Till we cuts off in a box. So.
A big box.
Box, take it with all your figures.
One user.
Like Tutankhamun with all his stuff.
Yeah.
So, it's a balance. Again, it's a balance of things, So
is that the big flip, though, that especially in terms of Star Wars, in that, when you had a 3-year gap between movies, you got 3 years to work waves out. But now, with stuff coming pretty hot and fast, now you're in a sense, you're chasing the TV or movies in a way that maybe you weren't 20 years ago, because...
Oh, absolutely, It always used to be 3 years, didn't it? Every gaps between movies, and it was only really movies in those days. Now it's movies and Disney Plus stuff and all this kind of great content that our people, that our partners are putting out. Yeah,
there is so much.
It keeps us, and you've got to choose. You've got to make the choices, right? So that's why it goes all the way back to reading the sentiment.
Yeah.
So like, what are people going to be really into? What is going to be the demand immediately? What are the slow burners? What are going to become classics? And like no one's going anywhere. We'll get there on something. So I know we do.
Clone Wars era, you could make everything.
Yeah.
And Bad Batch, it's mixed in with 40 other TV shows and movies.
Exactly. And things like Bad Batch and stuff, like we'll get there.
Yeah.
And you're probably sick of hearing myself or Dwight or Ryan always saying, we're going to get there, we're going to get there. But there's only so much we can do, and but it kind of adds to the story in my mind. It's the thrill of the hunt. I just don't want the hunt taking too long, and I know some of it takes a little while, but we're not ignoring it. We do know that we've got to get there. So we will. Yeah. We will.
Before you go, because obviously you've got the panel in a bit to prep for and everything, if you were saying to collectors, stick with us. We've got great things. How would you summarise a reason for a collector who's been in it for a while or been in it forever to stick with what's coming?
Cool, blimey. That's like... I think you're going to see a return to what it really used to be about storytelling. Like, that is a central heart of why I get up in the morning. It's storytelling. So you're going to see return to tattooing for vintage collections. You're going to see some things in 26 that are going to be new and are going to spread potentially both scales that we can get storytelling. And
27 is a small anniversary coming.
I think in my the biggest pop culture anniversary in history. It should be. It absolutely should be. And I am very excited about what we're starting to talk about for like 27.
Because that's what was out in 77, and that's it. You wait till the next year.
27. I'm really excited. Look, I had the honour of coming in on the 40th anniversary, which was incredible.
Yes.
The 50th, I can't wait. I cannot wait. So I think a collector's life is a hard life.
Yeah.
It's a life of disappointment. It's a life of highs and lows. Yeah. But I tell you, we do it because we love it, and that is what love is. Love is painful. Yes. And devotion is painful.
We've known you long enough, and you've been with the brand, with Hasbro long enough that we know how passionate you are about it. I know where your roots are.
100%. Yeah. But it's we can all ask ourselves as toy collectors, like, why do we do this to ourselves? And
how many more bits of green plastic does Matt need in his face?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And we all probably come to the same answer, and it's just like, I just love it. It's just who I am. I've rebelled against the request to grow up. I've stayed young. I still play.
Cool, weren't we?
We were actually. Yeah. When nerds were really, when you were a nerd, you got beaten up. But nowadays, it's like kind of cool. We're cool.
Yeah.
Honestly, people, we are cool. Stay with us for the journey. I'm not going to be able to give you everything you want when you want it, but that's all right. It's part of the fun.
Thanks for that.
Hey, you are welcome. Good to see you again.
There's this book that will never be produced. And when I was looking at it, I was thinking, well, you've got this toy book here, and then a lot of collectors I know, they buy the vintage collection to take pictures.
That's right.
And that's what keeps them energized. It's something I've never personally been interested in, but it's what keeps people going. And that's what a lot of people do for the vintage collection.
Totally. I've got no pictures of me as a kid with any of my Star Wars stuff, because back then you just didn't take pictures wastefully.
No.
You know, you'd take your 36 pictures on a roll, you'd send it off to the, Auto Photo Snaps or wherever you sent it off to, Max Spielman or whatever, and it would come back. And if you took 36 pictures, you knew straight away that 6 of them were going to be crap. Your finger would be over the lens, or you'd move when you took the picture and it was blurry. But you'd probably generally get 75% of decent pictures. Now I've walked around the hall downstairs and shot all the tables.
Yeah.
And I've probably took 100 pictures and I'll edit them down to about 30, and away you go. So the opportunity to take pictures now is infinitely more than it was then. But I do, to what you just said, I have got loads of pictures of my figures set up next to the Falcon or my original, Cantina creature. I've got pictures of them. No pictures of me. The concept of a selfie wasn't a thing.
No.
But there's pictures of them. So it's exactly what you just said about that book.
And Steve has been... don't think we can quite mention some of the stuff he said, but he did allude to going forward.
Yeah.
He has a particular project in mind that involves what we're talking about, that he thinks would ignite some excitement.
And it's interesting, as the conversation went on, that everybody's aware, we're aware as collectors, he's aware as a collector, but also as somebody in the industry. And it's definitely something Dave Tree's aware of, that if you don't sort of curate, and nurture's not the right word, but just make sure you're servicing to a degree that vintage crowd, that over time that vintage crowd will disappear, because one, just attrition, people get old and die, people get out the hobby, but there's always been people getting out the hobby. Are you going to hook in 50-year-old collectors, let's say, with something like Skeleton Crew? Now, I know we've both seen it. We went to the press screening last week. We had a blast of a time, and we both love it. And we both said, if there was a retro range of Skeleton Crew figures, we'd be all over it. And Steve just smiled. So we don't know the status of that, and he's not going to tell. That's fair enough. But the point is that, again, that's another collector thing. They've got limited slots. They've got to pick their battles every year. That Star Wars gets older as we push towards the 50th. There's we've got Skeleton Crew now. You've got Andor coming out not that long away. You've got Visions coming out not that long after that. Then they're filming Ahsoka Season 2 next year. They're probably doing the Mangold film. So all of them, to some degree, are going to have some sort of servicing of to put figures out from those sort of little corners of the IP. and you can't release everything. It's not like back in the day when you could probably lay out, we're on a lovely big table right now, you could probably lay out the Tatooine street from A New Hope, and a lot of those things you saw on screen, there's probably a figure of it somewhere over the last 30, 40 years.
Agreed.
But that's not going to happen going forward. There's just too much stuff coming out.
Well, we ended up talking about you have to pinch yourself sometimes to remember what era that we're in. So I always go back to the year of 2005 with Revenge of the Sith. There was something like, someone will probably correct me properly, about 64 figures in that line.
Yeah.
And that was what you had for the year, because 2006, well, then it was the Saga collection.
That's right.
And again, Steve was talking about this, and the phrase he used, I reckon he, in this little chit-chat, very casual, I reckon he said it about 3 or 4 times. The legacy of 3.75.
He did say that, yeah.
He kept coming back to this, and this is something that he's really, really, really focusing on. They're trying to keep that going, get in your 20-year-olds, because there's a difference between a kid buying a toy and a collector.
That's right.
Now, I'm fascinated in what we talked about on the drive. When do you become as a kid, you don't collect.
No,
you can't collect.
You buy to play.
Yeah. When do you then go, I'm going to keep this. This is important that I keep this and be a collector.
Yeah.
And what then drives that forward?
And chasing the ones you're missing. I think you get to a point, especially with the original vintage line, when you got to the last 17 and stuff like that, and there were some kids, I mean, God, I only finished my last 17 maybe 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. There was a couple missing that I just never got. Luke Stormtrooper, I never even saw it, and I managed to pick one up, funny enough, here at Farthest From. You know, there's things like that where did the change from I want to open my yak face to play with it to I just want to own that thing? And also, I think for me, I stopped collecting the toys, but my Star Wars focus never stopped. It just changed to other things I wanted to get. So then it was, well, now I want to get them all on video. Now I want to buy all the novels. Nice. Now I want to chase down the books and records, because even though that I was even then I was way beyond them in maturity. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. So, like you say, when does that change from I want to play this, I want to pretend I'm this guy, to I want to own this, because it's almost like the maturity line of, well, now I want it because it's part of my childhood. It's not I'm playing with it as a child.
Exactly.
It's now part of my childhood.
Steve was talking something about like Yak Face, if I recall, he thought it was somewhat of a myth because he had long gotten out of the last 17 to him. He had no clue for a while.
He saw it in the Sansui book.
Yeah, and then when he thought, well, this can't be real. Yeah. And it's something that I'd like to put to him over the weekend is that, so when you get to the 90s, people have come of age who were kids of the OT era. And I think what we've seen the past couple of years is the massive interest in the prequels. Yeah. And I always say, I get to say to people who go, you know, the prequels are good. I go, yeah, I know. Because I saw them when I was 8, and I know.
They're my Star Wars, thank you very much. Yeah,
absolutely. But now people who have come of age now, I mean, I never got out of collecting. I don't have to go back and get anything. I've kept everything. Yeah. But people go, oh, right, let's go back and get the prequel stuff. Yeah. Will that keep happening? Yeah. So Steve, and it's something that he sparked in me, I'd like to put to him, well, could an avenue be the prequels? Is that how you get your 20-year-olds to come in through the vintage collection? Yeah. And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe Steve doesn't himself know, but it's an interesting conversation that, from what I can gather, Hasbro are constantly talking about now. It's
funny you say 20 years to the prequels, because the prequels were pretty much finished 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Although you could argue when the Clone Wars era starts, that is literally within the prequel era. So I've said this before to Mark on the show, that you go from the first look Mace Windu figure in '98, sort of around the time of the first teaser in the back end of the year, right through to the end of season 5 of the Clone Wars, because the lost season came a bit after. But that was the Clone Wars era. So really, the Clone Wars era, if you want to consider that as the prequel era, was. What's that? What's that, 12, 13 years? Yeah. And there's not an awful lot within that scope that's outside of the prequel trilogy stuff. I mean, maybe The Force Unleashed, maybe steps outside that.
The only thing that springs to mind, and it was literally just the DVD release of the OT.
Yeah.
And you had the OT collection.
That's right. And that's right at the end of that year. That's 2010, 2011.
So the original trilogy, the one I'm referring to is 04.
Oh, I was thinking of the Blu-ray.
Yeah, so the Blu-ray was 2011, but even that didn't have a specific line.
No.
So that was it. And we did allude to this yesterday, is that it's a sign of, I think it takes a while for us to remember, because life moves so quick. But really, if you were to apply everything pre-Disney, so right, you're in the Phantom Menace year, you're in Attack of the Clones year, you're in the Micro Series Clone Wars. Really, we should just be in the Mando era. That's all you should be seeing. But what you see is people go, oh, more Mando, I don't want Mando. We want more, new.
Yeah.
Well, we've had so many new shows. Which era are we in?
And for a company like Hasbro, and they're not the only ones, because Lego and all the others have the same sort of same problem. It's not a problem. They're in business, so they're there to sell toys. But the same issue is that because there's so much stuff, because there's so many things coming out, that how do you determine? Okay, when Revenge of the Sith comes out, I don't know how many characters are on screen in Revenge of the. There's a lot. It's probably the busiest of the three. There's a lot. And they serviced that film really, really, really well, didn't they? There's not many things in that film that you didn't get. Most things are in there.
Vader's medical droid as a figure.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's all out there, and that was a great figure because it was evocative of FX7, and it just gives you that vibe. So there's all that stuff. But now you come to the modern projects, especially the Disney Plus era. I mean, let's not even talk about Rise of Skywalker, because there wasn't a line for Rise of Skywalker. So,
no, and I always thought that was a cardinal sin.
So do I, or on cardinal sin. But, you've got certain, again, slots that can only make so many figures, and can only tool so many figures. You can't kit bash these things. You've got to make them as accurate as possible because there's a quality thing. It must be so difficult for him, Steve, and others at Hasbro to go, I don't know, pick his project, Andor Season 2, we can make 6 Black Series, we can make 6 Vintage. You've got to have a Cassian, you've got to have a Bix, you've got to have a Krennic. Well, that's kind of easy because it's pretty much the same as the Rogue One. But you know what I'm saying? There's certain things, and this is the big if Vader's in there, you've got to have a Vader. So how do you determine what gets picked? It's tough.
Well, he was sort of talking, it's so difficult from a corporate level, what will sell. So if you put out a Vader, that will always sell.
Totally.
But then you'll always have, and it's always the negative that are the loudest, another Vader. We don't want Vader, we want this character that was on for 2 seconds. Yeah, but do you and then Hasbro may say, but do you understand that might not quite sell? Are you going to buy it? We need to know. You can't please everybody.
You know figures better than me, and what's come out, especially what's been released. Has there been an Arcana 5 figure?
No.
Right? To me, as a fan of Andor, looking at that series, and that series is brilliant, and Season 2 is the same, where you break it into blocks. So you could look at Andor and go, especially the second block, the Eldani stuff, you go, well, there's that whole group of people on Eldani, you go and do the heist. That feels like a set of figures. Yeah. That if Hasbro said, we're going to do a set of the Eldani heist range of figures, like when Rogue One came out and there was packs of figures, and back, when the sequel trilogy was coming out, they did packs of figures. And then you move on to the next chunk, and it's like, Aldani, we're going to do, you're going to buy the little white boxes you get of the figures, right? You're going to buy a box of Aldani prisoners, and you're going to have the Doctor with the blue, and you're going to have Kino Loy, and you're going to buy that as a box, and it's 80 quid. And you know what I mean? It feels, exactly. When you look at it feels like they must, and we've not said anything, that they can't have sat around the table and gone, wouldn't it be great to do a range of this, that or the other?
Oh, absolutely. As they sit there dreaming of all these things to do. But what there's always been, and I've heard this for a couple of years, this idea of a HasLab is, does it need to be these? I mean, now the simple mission of the HasLab is that these are dream projects.
Yeah.
This is what, look, we cannot just put these on a shelf. Yeah. This is what the dream. But I have heard so many people over the years going, well, why don't you do this 6-pack of figures? Yeah. And you yourself said this. I think they're constantly, I wouldn't rule out anything.
Yeah.
ever going forward. Just because we're stuck in some, not stuck in some way sounds quite negative, but it doesn't mean things can't change, won't change, or that they're not looking to change. Because I know fans can get quite frustrated and, oh, it's always this, but it's not through want of trying.
Yeah.
And I can really, really truthfully say, after talking to Steve, whatever you might be wanting, he wants as well.
Yeah. And isn't that great? It makes you think that the fandom changes, wants change. You know, me as a kid pulling those Palator figures off the bubbles, which just makes me cringe thinking about it. But what else was I going to do? You know, playing with those toys. Couldn't get them out of the box fast enough and playing with those toys. But there was no mobile phone or PlayStation 5 or 3,000 channels on your telly to distract me from doing that. That was the play. Yeah. That was the thing. Go and get me dad's little single cassette player deck and play Star Wars that I'd recorded off my uncle's double vinyl and just listen to Star Wars and play with my figures. You know, that was the thing. And, you know, as we said before, you go to school, you talk to your mates at school. The playground was the internet for us as kids because there wasn't an internet, not that we knew of. So, you know, so that was where you got your information. Some kid might have read something in Starburst or somebody's brother read it in Starlog, and then the rumours start, and then you're reading the letters pages of, I don't know, Return of the Jedi Weekly, and they post all these, well, maybe Luke gets killed by Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi, and all these rumours, and it just sparks the imagination so much.
It was the idea of a mystery. Because we know everything, I mean, the sort of a slight tangent is there's constant debate about movie stars. There's no movie stars now.
True.
And one of the fascinating pieces I read, can't remember who or when, forgive me, it was, well, when you went to the cinema, you saw this film star, and it was a special event. You had to... Now, this may sound facetious, but you had to get out of the house, you had to make a special trip, and you paid your ticket, and the lights went down, and this was a big event. And you didn't know about Jimmy Stewart, you didn't know anything about... You didn't know what he ate for breakfast. Now we know everything about everybody.
Yeah, the mystery's gone.
Yeah, and life must have...
And the mystique has gone.
The mystique has gone, absolutely. And so you find this a bit now, is that the excitement as a kid, or maybe like you say, internet era, was you didn't have all the answers. So you could take your box of figures and you would do this wild adventure, and then suddenly you might have made this... I remember making a terrible figure out of a lollipop stick.
Yeah.
And the character was called something ridiculous.
Yeah.
But it was fun because you didn't have all the answers.
That's right.
You don't always, and we alluded to this in another conversation, is people always ask me, well, why you're the Star Wars, I know you was the Star Wars guy. Why? And I always say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't quite pinpoint it to.
Yeah.
Why have you dedicated a massive portion of your life to collecting this big museum of things? I go, don't know. And if everybody knew, they would have made it.
Of course they would.
They haven't.
Totally.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
When we were kids, and it was innocent, and it was just the thing you were into, and other kids are into other stuff, and there's other things that come out that grab your attention, but Star Wars was so far up and above most other things in multiple ways that it was very easy to be into Star Wars. And even as a kid, there was that, I mentioned the word attrition, there was that attrition of kids who kind of got out and got into other stuff. Some got into cars, some got into football. Yeah. You get to your teens and most of us got into girls, you know, and so there's that sort of thing. But I think for me, I was in a sweet spot that because I used to get Fantha Tracks and all that stuff, and I collected the comics. So the comics were still going on in the UK, and then West End started doing the role play, and I've been playing D&D for a few years by that point. So you just shift over to West End Star Wars, and then that's what kept us going. So that I didn't experience the dark times. That's a concept that came to me way later because I was busier than ever during that what people consider a dead period for Star Wars. Like, kidding? I was role playing 3 nights a week. It was non-stop. We now can, for example, go and talk to Steve Evans and talk about the process of how these things are made, and he can give you a little bit of how the sausage is made, and well, we can't do this, and that only costs more than that, and the process of making this is the same as the process of making that, and yada yada. When we were kids, that wasn't even a thought. The only thing I knew about Star Wars toys when I was a kid was what I saw on the back of the leg. Oh, this was made in Taiwan. This was made in Hong Kong. But I don't know how I knew, but I knew Palatoy was in Colville, and I knew Colville wasn't far away. It was in the Midlands. So even as a kid, I knew that these things are made kind of locally. So there was almost a little sense of, especially in the Palatoy Star Wars Empire era, not ownership, but kind of ownership. You know, you knew enough. You knew that some of the actors, you knew Alec Guinness was British. You knew Peter Cushing was British. You know, if you read that little brochure that, you know, when people went to the cinema, the widescreen pink-paged one, you know, you'd learn about some of the actors in there. So you knew some of the actors were Scottish and some of the actors were English or whatever. So, wow, these are people that are here. Yeah. Because Star Wars came in, the anticipation for Star Wars was so ridiculous. This massive, you know, more money than Jaws by the time it got to the UK. It was the biggest film in the world by the time it got to the UK. And it was made in the UK, and even as a kid, I knew it was made here. Most of it was made here. So there's always been that sort of ownership of it. But that's by the by. When you get to kids now, and they look at Star Wars, and they may know The Mandalorian, or they've seen Grogu when they've been walking down the aisles of Asda or whatever, and it's still a pop culture thing. You still hear Star Wars references most weeks on Coronation Street or EastEnders. Somebody makes a Darth Vader joke or a Force joke or whatever it might be. There's so many other IPs now. There's so many things to compete. You know, Steve works on Marvel. That's got to be the biggest competitor to Star Wars in terms of grabbing young kids.
And I think it's... So going back to your dark times, I never had them either.
No.
So by the time Sith came out, I was 14, and it never occurred to me to stop.
No.
I remember that Christmas, it was, you know, you get the obligatory, anything you like for Christmas? And there's a 14-year-old boy going, there's this great Wookiee flyer toy that's available at toy. It never, and then Star Wars was now as a golden age of toy. My favourite line is the 30th anniversary.
Yeah, the Saga ones.
No, so 2007, it was the ones with the coin.
Oh, yeah.
It was still $5.99 a toy. You had your hero characters. You're always going to have your Luke and your Han, and then you had deleted scene Biggs in that line. Then you had Magna Guard from Sith.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic line. You had the album, the coin album.
Yeah.
Steve alluded to that earlier.
And the posters with the lists.
Yeah, absolutely. There was no dark times.
No.
Star Wars wasn't dead. If anything, excitement was huge.
Because I think even then, Lucas had, I forget which celebration it was, I think it was Celebration 3, when he'd said, oh yeah, you know, I wouldn't say we'd never do Knights of the Old Republic. And then Underworld starts to be talked about, and then a Clone Wars animated show gets talked about, and of course we know the history of Clone Wars happens and look where it went, but Underworld didn't. And then that test footage came out a couple of years ago that we saw to validate the fact that it wasn't a myth, it was a thing. It was going to happen. It looked great, didn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and the what ifs and what could have been. So yeah, your point's totally there.
And it's interesting with eras. Some people, you know, we may find it odd that a kid only knows Baby Yoda, but that was the same in 2008, 2010.
Yeah.
Some kids only knew the Clone Wars of the adventures of Anakin and Obi and Ahsoka. And then, well, what did you make to A New Hope? Huh? Who? What's A New Hope?
Well, there's a comparison for you that I think's weird when I think back to it. So the first time I saw Star Wars on the television was 82, October, I think, when it was shown on ITV. But it also came out on video at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it was something you could rent from the video shop. You could never get it. It was always rented out. But there it was. So we recorded it off the telly. And that was what I watched endlessly throughout those summers of 83, 84 and onwards. And then the next thing that came out was Empire in 84. Mm-hmm. But pirate videos had really kind of taken off in 82, 83. When E.T. came out, there was so many pirate copies of E.T. knocking around. That's how a lot of people I knew saw E.T. the first time was pirate copies. And then by 83, Jedi comes out. I saw Jedi before it came out in the UK on a pirate copy.
Really?
Because I had a friend whose dad worked on the rigs.
Wow.
So that was how. So I knew Star Wars, and I knew Jedi, and I'd seen Empire at the cinema, and I'd read the comics, and I was very, very aware of what the story of Empire was. But visually, I wasn't anywhere near as aware of Empire Strikes Back as I was of Star Wars and Jedi. They were the two that I really knew well.
Interesting.
So it's just weird how these things come to you. The orders as well.
You know, forgive me on this one, but the story about pirate copy, it would have been Easter of 2000, and another visceral memory that I can picture, the Easter egg, and there was a gift off Mum and Dad, and the gift was a pirated The Phantom Menace, because they had a friend who was able to do that, and I stuck it on because it hadn't quite reached us, or they couldn't afford to. Anyway, there was a Z that would go from the left-hand screen, and it would appear on the top right screen, and this kept happening, and they could see, and I was watching it, and about 20 minutes in, Anya, what's the matter? This isn't right. This isn't. Where's the? I don't want the Z on. Thank you. In my head, then I would have been 8 years old. I wasn't happy. I didn't want it. Didn't want the pirate, and they knew then. They were okay. This is clearly really special. I didn't want it. I can't quite remember the feeling, but I felt it was tainted. I didn't want it ruined. Why is there a Z? It was really irked me. Really, really irked me about that. So then they. Go on then, we'll go and get you there.
Get the real one.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? I know the first time certainly in the UK, nobody saw it on television. It wasn't available. It never got shown on television. It only got shown once in the States. So anybody who saw the holiday special in the UK saw it on a pirate video. I remember going to one of the Empire Days down in Watford in '96, and great guests like, who was there? Jeremy Bullock was there. I think Peter Mayhew was there. Kenny Baker was there. Great guests, really good guests. And they had around the back of the hall in like a walkway. Don Henderson, it was his last appearance. I remember that. They had a screen playing Return of the Ewok, Warwick's little documentary that he made whilst making Jedi. And I just remember with my mate Paul just stood there watching Return of the Ewok, and it was like, you'd kind of heard of it, you sort of knew of it, and there it was, just in like an old VHS player with a television stuck on top of it, and there was nobody else around. And I remember thinking, you can just
everything's so accessible now. I remember when the 2004 DVD versions were coming out, it was an event.
Oh, big time.
It was an event.
It was in the 90s with the THX version, the remasters, and always with new covers.
And it was not only for the films, but you couldn't wait to get your hands on that bonus disc.
That's right.
Because there was, you sort of read in the magazine, this Empire of Dreams, 2.5 hour. And because it wasn't, you couldn't just click it on. Now, we go back to Mystique.
We said this, didn't we? Yeah. The immediacy has kind of not spoilt it, but it's too accessible. We said that when we were driving. I can't think what scene. I think I said something like,
the asteroid scene.
That's it. If I want to watch the asteroid scene, we were driving down a country lane. If I wanted to watch the asteroid scene, we could pull into the side of the road. I could get onto Disney Plus because I've got access on my phone, and literally within 2 or 3 minutes, providing the Wi-Fi is working, we could be watching the asteroid scene from Empire Strikes Back, and that's cool. But it's such a quick hit. The real treat is, it's a bit like listening to your favourite song on the radio when you can't hit pause on the radio. So you've got to give it your full attention.
Exactly. Forgive me if you've talked about this in the past couple of months before, Mark. I had a really special experience last weekend of August. My girlfriend and I, we went to see Star Wars, A New Hope. It was IMAX at our cinema.
Nice.
Okay, lovely. Let's get that. We're members. Get that booked in. Do you know, it really did something for me. Like we talked about just, mate, you had to. It sounds like I'm trying to crack a joke. I'm not. You have to get out. You have to make the effort to go. You're sat down. You don't click it. You're told, well, you need to be there. The conversion it helped was fantastic. Christina looked at me and she said, how old is this film again? I said, it's nearly 50 years old.
It's ridiculous to think that.
It was phenomenal. And you know, for a week, I was on a genuine high. I was so excited.
Hi, this is Kevin Cornwall, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So we're at Farthest From 26. It's Sunday afternoon. I'm here with John.
Hello there.
And we're here with Brian Hickey. Brian, how has the weekend been for you?
It's been absolutely fantastic. I've visited Fordingbridge, a few times in the past for different kinds of shows. This is my first Farthest From. It's been a brilliant experience getting to meet so many great people, including the Fantha Tracks team, which is great. And of course, Mr. Steve Evans from Hasbro has been brilliant, and getting to hang out with some old friends like Dave Tree and all the cool stuff gang. So it's been great.
Can't believe it's your first Farthest From. I thought you'd been before. It feels like you've been before.
I'm a Star Wars fan, a Star Wars collector. I've got a big focus on vintage, but I've never managed to make a Farthest From. I've done other Star Wars shows, around the UK, but it's my first time here for Farthest From, and it's a lovely kind of intimate kind of experience. It's a really, really nice kind of show. Very different to some of the bigger kind of cons that you get. There's a great atmosphere here.
We have a collecting podcast called Collecting Tracks, all about, obviously, collectibles. To our listeners on Making Tracks, which is our new show that we do, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that Star Wars fans would know you best for?
I'd be best known in the Star Wars community for my Star Wars toy photography. So I've worked on a project over the last few years, from about 2017 through to 2021-22. I was working on recreating the original trilogy movies using only the vintage Star Wars toys, and with really simple kind of diorama sets, just nicely lit.
Yeah.
And I shared those kind of on my Instagram and on some of the socials on Facebook, some of the Facebook groups, and they were really well received by the collector community, which is great. And I compiled that into an online book that people can read for free up on totaltoybooks.com. So that's what I'm best known as, amongst collectors.
It's been a talking point all weekend. This book, it's just been mentioned. It's absolutely gorgeous, absolutely. And what is the name of it? Creating
Star Wars Creating Adventure.
Creating Adventure. Yeah, absolutely stunning. We all want one. We all want one in our collection.
No kidding.
At home.
Well, that is something that the long-term goal would be to eventually release that as a proper physical book. But because it tells the stories of Star Wars, well, it's clearly it would need a license from Lucasfilm or Disney to make that happen. So that's been a longer journey than I thought it would be to try and get that license in place. But there's a lot of support out there from a lot of different people. So that's something that I'm still plugging away at, and hopefully in the not too distant future we'll be able to make that a reality.
When you pick a project, when a project comes to you, when do you know, as a Star Wars fan, as somebody that's loved it and grown up with it, when do you know that this is the one for me to invest my time and effort into?
Everything that I do in terms of my books, it's always a labour of love. So if I don't love it, I'm not going to do it. But if I do love it, I'm going to 100% get stuck into it. So that particular book, Star Wars Creating Adventure, that was something that the seed of the idea kind of formed around 2017. And it's one of those things that kind of sat with me for a long time, and the more I thought about it, the more I really, really wanted to do it. The biggest challenge for me wasn't the photography itself, it was trying to get access to toys that I didn't have in my collection. Some really rare pieces, and even some not so rare that I didn't have. So things like the Power of the Force skiff, I didn't own one of those. I didn't even know where I would get one of those. Or that scene where the Emperor arrives in the Death Star. How was I ever going to get enough figures together to be able to set that scene up? So they're the kind of challenges that kind of made me commit more to the project. Even though I didn't know at the time how I would be able to kind of get over those hurdles, it helped me to get more laser focus on it. So
it's clever. We were laughing as we were looking at it because it's so inventive. And even in there's like micro collection stuff in there. There's just little. You've been very clever in using the perspective of different sort of scales to make the shots work.
The Vader carry case is the Vader looming in the background.
Yes.
Right. Is that That's
so that kind of famous poster. With kind of Luke and Leia in the foreground, and then Vader's head behind them. Yeah. And I'm blanking now on the artist's name. I know you guys will know the artist's name, but I'm drawing a blank on it. But that was one I wanted to recreate for the cover. Yeah. So the Vader carry case just seemed like a totally natural.
Oh, it works.
Set piece to use for
that.
It's
the Hildebrandt's cover, isn't it?
The Hildebrand, yes, that's it. Yeah. Beautiful painting. So obviously, what I've recreated isn't as complex as their painting. Yeah. But people immediately recognise it for the homage that it is.
Yeah. New projects. What's coming? Because you did the book with Bob.
Yes.
Which was tremendous and did tremendously well.
Yeah, big hit.
Yeah. and you've got this other projects that we're sort of hoping that the stars align and that comes out. We're definitely hoping it comes out. We all want to own it. But what's coming up next for you?
So, well, the next project is going to be a Star Wars book, and like the book I did with Bob, which is obviously a Palatoy history, this one is Palatoy's history with Star Wars only.
Yeah.
So it's just focused on the Star Wars brand from 1977 in terms of when Palatoy first got brought into the project, right through to when Palatoy eventually it finished up with Star Wars around the Power of the Force line. But there's so much to tell in that particular story, and one of the things which I'll talk about in my panel later today is that Bob and the other designer, Brian Turner, who passed away there on Friday, they both gave me all of their personal collection of slides that they had taken over their many years working at Palatoy.
Yeah.
And so I'm working with them to digitize those, get them all scanned. I return those back to Bob, and they'll end up with the Colville Heritage Society. They'll be the custodians of those images.
Wow, that's amazing.
Hundreds of images taken by Bob and Brian. So that would obviously, that archive would include a lot of never before seen Star Wars imagery from behind the scenes at Palatoy, including Bob's trip to America in November 1977.
Right.
Wow.
And even like personal Polaroids of Bob having dinner with Jack Holland from Kenner and his family. They're going to be in the book. And that's something that I'm really excited about, sharing those.
My initial, I didn't know this. My initial reaction to this is it's more than just a book. It's history preserved.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So how is this going to work then? Is it in the pipeline? Is it Kickstarter? What's the sort of plan?
We're going to bring it to Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Where we are right now with the project, we're in what we call the gathering stage. So we're doing our research, doing our interviews, compiling all the images that we want to include in the book.
Yeah.
So by the time the Kickstarter launches in early 2025, we'll have all that work complete. And then once assuming that the Kickstarter funds, we're ready to start assembling the book straight away. We'll have all the narrative written, the interviews will be transcribed, the licensing for any third-party images that we need to pay for. That will all be in place and just ready to go, so we can pull the trigger straight away if it funds, and then we would hope to get the book out. Well, certainly it will definitely be a 2025 delivery for the books. We'll aim to get that out as early as we can for backers. Assuming, like I say, it is successful.
I'm sure it will be, and I don't want to jinx it, but I'm sure it will. But I'm fascinated that when you were working on the book with Bob before, and obviously his career included numerous sort of IPs, if you like, to drill into the Star Wars element, you and Bob must have sat back and thought, wow, there's so much more that we could put in here. But I guess in a book that covers his whole career with all the different sort of brands that he did, you can't just focus on Star Wars. You've got to give fair shot to everything. So
yes,
I'm guessing that's how it kind of played out, that you thought there's another book in this.
100%. In fact, the biggest challenge we had with Bob's book was trying to fit everything into it. So we had, we had a very kind of limited budget to work with. We knew we could only have so many pages, and the amount of material that did not make the cut, that was still great material.
Yeah,
but we
book
just
entirely.
absolutely. In fact, I would be, if Bob had the kind of the energy and the enthusiasm for it, he could easily do some sort of a volume 2 or a follow up to that, even if it was just a collection of that Palatoy image archive. That on its own would be a beautiful photo book with some amazing memories, so many Toy Fair photos, some behind the scenes, like on the factory floor in the design studio. Like it's unbelievable what's there. So eventually all that material will be publicly available once the Colville Heritage Society take control of it. But we're a few months away before I have all those images scanned and handed back over. So that is a work in progress.
That's exciting.
It really is, isn't it?
It's just as important as preserving the toys themselves. Is the story? We're collectors. We're story guys with the collection. I could tell you a yarn about a rubber I've got for 10 minutes and tell you the story about that.
That's an eraser for our American listeners.
So this, I didn't know. That's genuine. That's amazing that all this could be put in. So so there's been a lot of talk. Obviously, Steve Evans here, the Ghost and Tears. And so with the campaign, would you have any stretch goals, anything like that, or tiers or unlocks?
Absolutely, there's going to be stretch goals. So we'll be, our kind of minimum funding goal will get us a good paperback book.
Yeah.
Which will be 256 pages, so lots of great content in there. Then the first stretch goal would be to unlock a chapter dedicated to the Marvel UK comics.
Wow!
Because there's some great material there. They didn't just reprint the American Star Wars comics. There was if you think about it, the American comics were monthly, but the British comics were weekly.
Yeah.
So at a minimum, they had to create 3 extra covers every month. So they brought in artists like John Higgins and Paul Neary. Like, these are legends in the British comic scene.
Alan Moore wrote stuff, didn't he? And
Alan Moore wrote stuff as well. So like, there's so much to tell on that side of it. So we'll have a chapter dedicated to that part of the story. And of course, Palatoy did a lot of marketing through Marvel UK as well. So there's that direct connection too. And I should really mention at this stage that the team working with me on this book. So Paddy Lennon and David MacDonald are 2 collaborators that I've worked with on our Action Force books.
Yeah.
David is very much a comics expert. Paddy is very much a toys expert. So they're bringing all that knowledge as well to the table, as well as my own. Like, my role is mainly designer, photographer, and editor on the project. But Paddy and David bring all that other kind of niche knowledge for those different areas.
Yeah.
So. So unlocking that comics chapter is going to be a really important goal for me, because I think it's part of the overall, an important part of the story.
Yeah.
From there, we'll be looking at kind of different kind of print finishes. So the next stretch goal is we want to unlock a hardback version of the book. So it immediately upgrades from paperback to hardback.
Yeah.
So everybody who comes in to support the Kickstarter, they're going to get a hardback book. And then eventually we'll work our way up to a very collectible slipcase. Nice. That'll be revealing I don't have a full design, but I have a kind of a rough mock-up that'll be able to show on the panel on screen.
Oh, today?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
So have your phones ready to take a few pictures.
We will. Fantastic. I'm fascinated. Like John said, the history of it is so important, especially here in the UK.
Yeah, just as important.
And us as Midlanders, it's not a million miles from our part of the world, so it's just nice to know that Star Wars has got a real deep history, certainly in the UK, the history of UK Star Wars collecting and just UK Star Wars fandom.
Yeah.
So Total Star Wars is the name of the book?
Total Star Wars, the Palatoy Saga. That's our working title.
Yeah.
So it might be tweaked a little bit before it goes live, but right now the working title is Total Star Wars, the Palatoy Saga, which follows the same pattern as our Total Action Force books that we've put out previously.
And if we're waiting for updates, where can we find?
If you go to totaltoybooks.com, and there's a newsletter sign up form there on the homepage. So that's a great way to keep in touch. But also, what I'll be revealing today is the holder page on Kickstarter. So while the campaign isn't live, there is a holder page up there which you can follow that. Again, I'll share the link later on, and then people will be able to, they'll get a notification from Kickstarter as soon as the campaign goes live. Oh, nice. And we will have an early bird pledge level.
So early bird, perfect.
If you get in within the first 72 hours, you'll be able to get your book at a really reduced rate. So we're hoping, and even though the figures aren't fully finalised yet, we're hoping to be able to do that early bird at around £30. Wow. For a book.
Really?
And then shipping on that, it'll ship from Ireland, so shipping will be about £9-ish.
Yeah.
So under £40 shipped at the early bird level.
Fantastic. Wow.
That's a bargain.
We're going to be all over this on Fantha, no doubt about it. This is phenomenal.
Forget a newsletter, call me straight away.
We'll come round and pick it up.
That's amazing. Wow, that's really that's amazing. Amazing.
So that's certainly the ambition for this project is we're really fired up about it on our side of it. I'm looking forward to kind of sharing the details. I'll have some of those photos to show off from the Palatoy archive as well as some of my own diorama photography in the presentation. And then we're as I say, we're looking for a very early launch in 2025. So and again, this isn't a secret because I'm going to say this on the panel. Late January, sometime in February at the latest, we'd look to go live with that. So it'll give everyone a chance to recover after Christmas.
Smart move.
Very wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. This has been fascinating. I can't wait. I'm buzzed about this.
Yeah, we could carry on talking for until the panel, probably. Yeah, amazing.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
Guys, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Like this weekend, I've been looking forward to this weekend.
Same.
Not every weekend.
No.
You have to have those things, so this all mixes together.
And Star Wars, more than almost anything. Like, I love my Trek. I love my indie.
Yeah.
Me and Ruth both love Harry Potter. But there's nothing... So, for example, Potter, there's a good example. We try and go each year, most years, not every year, but most years we try and go to the Potter experience in Watford. And we go, and we know it's going to be a great day because we love the films and we think they're brilliant and we love to know how it's made and we enjoy it. We always have a bite to eat there and we make a full day of it. So you're there 6 or 7 hours. It's just a lovely day. But that's one day.
Yeah.
Star Wars, most days, there's something that even involuntarily, without even thinking about it, if you were looking in a mirror, you'd go, I just gave the biggest, cheesiest grin because that made me think of something like today. We've seen all these lovely people. We're having a great chat about Star Wars. We've got a good evening ahead of us and a good day tomorrow. And that's just one weekend. We know we've got that coming multiple weekends. Next year, we're both going to Japan.
Absolutely.
That's going to be such a moment in our lives, not just for celebration, going to Japan. Well, we wouldn't be going to Japan if it wasn't for Star Wars.
I've had this conversation with my girlfriend, and we had said, she picked me up from the train station from when we got back from London, and I had said, I've maybe heard people seem to think it's going to be in America. She said, oh, well, you can count me there, or you can take me to America. And I thought, Japan. But we got in the car. She said, have you had a good time? I'll tell you all about it. She said, where's the next one? I went, Japan? She went, well, we have to go to Japan. How can you not? Yeah. Obviously, we know we've had to work out money and stuff like that. But what's been wonderful, and this ties back to what we've talked about, I think a 2-year gap has helped that.
Totally.
Time goes quickly. The older we all get, I don't know how we're approaching 4 or 5 months away from Japan. Yeah. But that feeling of about after London celebration had after the dust had settled, about a month after, you go, right, Japan. You have to. I mean, this is a slight tangent, not for Star Wars, but for life. I'm a big believer. You have to have things to look forward to.
Totally.
If you have these things every day, it doesn't work. If you have to have things to keep you going, no matter what that may be.
That's funny you say that. I think that because doing Fantha, it's very, very time consuming, and the magazine and all the other odds and sods I do, and then actual work, and then a marriage, and then family and life. Anybody's got all these things to think about, but Fantha's very time consuming. So with Fantha, for example, with the pods, or with the site, or just practical stuff that we have to deal with, behind the scenes stuff, there's always targets, and in the realms of the site and Fantha, I'm very target driven. I know how much I want to get on each day. I know how much I want to kind of get through, and so I generally go to bed going, I don't feel like I got much done today, and I'll sit there and go through it and go, but actually, I did this interview and I annotated this one and I sent this off to this guy and I pitched this to this one and then I did that on Fantha and I've edited 2 podcasts. Actually, I've done quite a lot today, and I've been to work. And the wife's happy, so it's a good day. So I think with like the day-to-day Star Wars, it's targets. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's now, this weekend has been something to look forward to, and we're having a good time. Japan will be one of those things when you're about to check out. I went to Japan. I had an amazing time in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sod's law, there'll be an earthquake when we get there, or something crap will happen. Godzilla will wake up. But that's something. There's always something. When we get past that, hopefully by the end of that convention or fairly soon after, they'll announce when the next one is. And I think most people talking to folks today are hoping it's going to be 27 for the 50th. Probably you think Anaheim. Yeah. So
it doesn't have to be grand things either. I mean, we've alluded to this a little bit over this weekend, but Disney Plus, I always say they were right not to follow the Netflix model of dropping everything on one day.
Agreed.
I mean, it helps for their subscription package because the idea is a Star Wars show finishes, well, you need to keep your package because actually the Marvel show starts next week. Netflix hasn't got that. They're their own IP themselves.
That's true.
Whereas now I know I loved Skeleton Crew.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
And now it's not costing, apart from the $4.99 a month, but what's great is all week, in the maelstrom of life and work and gigs and everything else, every day I go, episode 3, and that's great because it's what keeps you going. It really, really does. It doesn't have to be anything grand.
And that's the change, isn't it? Back in the day, it was like, I've just bought the latest issue of Star Wars Monthly, and you read it as a kid, and then a couple of days later you read it again, and you're reading the backup strips as well. I mean, that's how I got into Marvel. Really got into Marvel was the backup strips in Star Wars comics. And then Star Wars kind of tails off and becomes a backup strip in Spider-Man and Zoids. And by that point, it's like, okay, Star Wars comics are done now.
Yeah.
But I love these Marvel comics. So then I became a Marvel collector, and that's how that began. And run parallel. But that then was I can't wait till next week for the next episode of Skeleton Crew. Marvel, for example, is in a beautiful position because... And Marvel comics don't sell anywhere near what they used to sell, nowhere near what they used to sell. Then the Marvel comic was replacing essentially a TV or a movie. Now, if you're a Marvel fan, you can be a Marvel fan now and know loads about Marvel and never have read a comic. Yeah,
interesting. Wow, I hadn't thought of it. I'm not a Marvel. I've got no time for anything else. Which is takes up so much.
Totally. But that's something that Steve said. He says he comes across it with the work he does on Marvel. So you get some fans that are all about the MCU, and that's all that matters. And then you get, like Potter, some kids, like me, I never read the books. I've only seen the films, so I only know what's in the films. But there's others who read the books who are kind of a bit like, you need to read the books. And it's the same with Lord of the Rings. And it's kind of the same with Dune.
Yeah.
But with Marvel, it's so big that, especially when there's a show on, every week, you don't get a comic every week, but you're getting a TV episode every week.
Yeah.
So you can see why it happens. Star Wars, how many TV shows do you get a year? 2 or 3 with the animated stuff.
Yeah.
Next year we've got Andor, we've got Vision Season 3, Light and Magic Season 2. I don't know what else we've got coming next year. I'm sure there'll be some behind-the-scenes bits. There'll be stuff.
Yeah.
Little animated bits and bobs here and there, which are kind of
But
throw
doesn't
away
that feel
fun.
special? Because after Andor will finish... I believe, I'm going to pull out a quote here. Liam Neeson himself has alluded to this. You go too much too soon, loses that special feeling.
Yeah.
I know 1 or 2 friends who have said, only Andor. That I'm actually, it's going to sound so bizarre of me as an ultra passionate fan. I think that's not a bad idea.
Same.
Have Andor, and then you know what? That's it till Mando and Grogu movie.
And here we go, the full circle moment. Back to what Steve said about bringing new fans in and keeping the fans you've got.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen a change in the fandom from older fans like us who understand that you get a Star Wars film every 3 years. And every 3 years the circus comes to town. And you've got the anticipation of the build-up, and you've got the excitement after seeing it and seeing it again, and then it comes out on, Blu-ray or DVD or whatever, and there's that release. And then after that, you've got the 18 months till the next one comes. But it isn't 18 months, really. It's a year at best, because then the build-up for the next one starts in that sort of trilogy era. Now, you've got, we haven't had a film for, where are we now, 5 years now. We haven't got one coming until 26, so it's going to be 6.5 years until between films, which is not at all what we expected.
No, we were still sort of under the impression of it would be this monster rolling machine that would keep going, but for various reasons that we're all aware of. But on about anticipation, for the life of me, I cannot remember the author, but the book. Have you read the book Anticipation?
Yeah, Jonathan L. Bowen.
That's the one.
He did a follow-up book called Revenge.
Yeah. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it is.
And whenever I look at that on my bookshelf. And anyone can do it any time. Take yourself back to that. Let's say it's November the 17th, 2015.
Yeah.
And you're a month out.
Yeah.
The anticipation, the building up, the excitement, waking up that
crazy. Morning
going, oh, tonight is the...
Yeah.
And we do still get... The last time I sort of really felt that, but I always allude to very... unique circumstances was Mando season 2.
Yes, with Luke.
There was nothing else happening in life. Obviously, there was COVID and everywhere's shut down. You can't do anything. So Mando season 2 was in this really unique position. It was almost like a movie of the week.
Oh, big
and
time.
the anticipation each week, you would go, "Oh my God, is it next Friday yet? Next Friday yet?" And then that moment of Luke, the reveal, was just nothing short of spectacular. And so this is a question I'm curious to ask Steve is, we've got the anticipation of Mando and Grogu movie. I wonder if someone is in his position. Obviously, he has said that he has seen things and he knows things.
He has to.
He has to.
In his job.
They have to know because they're planning the merchandise now.
Yeah.
I wonder if he ever sees something. Let's say he saw something last week and he goes, "Oh, that's cool," but then 2 days later he goes, "You know, I would have liked to have seen that in the theatre. I would have liked to have." I see
your point.
Do you see what I'm saying? I've always wanted
that's
to know.
That's a good
that.
point. Because when we were talking, of course, he's not going to tell you anything, and I don't want to know anything. I think that's one of the few productions that's really got a mega tight lid on it.
I hope they keep it that way.
Nothing. I've heard a couple of things that sounded very positive, but nothing else. And I'm happy with that. I'm quite happy to go in. I don't mind spoilers. I'm not precious in that sense.
Yeah.
Somebody says, "Oh, have you heard about such and such?" No. Do you want to hear it? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not going to spread it unless it's, they say, "Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter." But with that, yeah, you're right. It must be weird for him, knowing, especially because he seemed really himself. He's a fan, but he seemed really enthused. He was like, "Oh, there's some really good stuff coming in that film," with the big grin on his face, like, "You're going to like this." And I think he's honest enough that if he wasn't lit up by it, he wouldn't have even mentioned it. He wouldn't have even done the smirky dodge eye roll. None of it. He wouldn't have touched it.
His heart is very much on his sleeve. Yeah. It really. So his panel tomorrow is Why We Collect. Is that right?
I don't know. I don't know what his panel's about.
I'm quite a amateur philosophy buff. Right. So it's something. I believe it's along those lines, and we should maybe do a follow-up review because I think absolutely. It's going to be about. I asked him. I said, "You need."
We did ask him a question, didn't we? And he went, listen tomorroh. I talk about that. Yeah.
Yes, we. And for the life of me, I can't remember what I asked him.
I never can. I'll just make it up on the spot.
But he was still. So we were talking to him at about 12 o'clock on the Saturday, and his panel is on the Sunday afternoon. I said, "Are you ready for your panel? You're prepped?" He said, "I've got to go through." He cares. You can tell. He said, "I've got to go through the notes." He says, "I want to make some tweaks. I'm waiting for a sign-off on 2 things."
That's right.
Waiting for a sign-off, whether I can... He's put his heart and soul into this.
Which don't you think is wonderful? I mean, I know he's known Dave for years, that he's that guy who's in the position that he's in, with the eyes on him that he has. Mm-hmm. Last year, Pablo Hidalgo was here. You're not going to find a guy more hooked in and watched, if you like, by elements of the fandom for any little snippet he gives. And he's very judicious and careful what he puts on social media. He's very clever because of this. And he's been in and around it forever. And Steve's been in and around it forever. Mm-hmm. And so he's got eyes on him. And yet here we are. We're sitting in the town hall in Fordingbridge on a Saturday afternoon. It's lovely. It stopped raining, thank goodness, but it looks like grey as anything. It is literally, as Dave always says, the farthest place from anywhere else. Yeah. So we really are out in the back end of nowhere, essentially, in terms of Star Wars. And here's Steve Evans about to do a talk in front of I don't know how many people tomorrow. And he put a post out on the Farthest From socials, basically saying, "I'm working on my article." Yeah. Dave did that great banner image for it. The care and the thought and the attention, it's irrelevant that he's not talking to 2,000 people in the main hall at Celebration, which he could.
Absolutely.
He's talking to ultra-passionate fans like you just referred to at a small event on the near the South Coast. I love the fact that... that's one of the things I love about Farthest From. We always talk about it in amongst us as friends and on the site. We talk about this like it's Celebration or London Film and Comic Con. It's, to me, it's in that bracket. It's not. It's a boutique show. It's a very small show. It's not a show that's going to pull thousands in. It's not built like that. That's not what it's meant to be. But the quality of what you get, the things that you get to see, the collectibles that we've seen even today, it's top-line stuff.
Well, it makes it feel special, doesn't it? Because you will be able to say, I was in the... Steve has dropped a couple of hints that it's not just going to be there's going to be a couple of, whatever they may be, sort of exclusive reveals. And because it's that feeling with anything, isn't it? It's, I was in the room. Yeah. No matter what that may be. Yeah. I was at that match. I was at that... I was at his last concert before he dropped dead.
That's it.
I was in the room. I was there. Because we like to feel... to type full circle.
Connected
to people, Star Wars. This is what Skeleton Crew. Absolutely not every. I'm not saying that everybody, but there seems to be. I'm fairly engaged, not the most engaged, but fairly engaged in the fandom. Generally, people are excited and happy. What does that do? Connects us. It connects us again, you know, and that's what Star Wars did for each generation. The aim seems to be, if they can get kids to connect with it,
keep that going.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know I, for one, feel connected again after, you know, maybe a quiet time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode. You're always very welcome.
Oh, thank you.
This is the second time we've done an episode like this for this one, so we should do it again, but we'll reconvene for another one. Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.